Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. We are doing this podcast style today due to some technical difficulties, which of course only happens during a conversation about technology. I'm your host, Nina Joshi, and I am very excited to bring on our guest today, Judy Keen from Novartis. Judy, would love if you could maybe kick things off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey into the healthcare industry.
Sure. Thank you, Nina. I'm happy to be here today. And we're going to be, as you said, switching to podcast after this intro, but I wanted to show my face while we can. I am the Director of Healthcare Association Engagement and Innovation at Novartis. I began as a PhD research scientist and had a research lab and a faculty position where I ran a research lab for a number of years, and then moved over and got very interested into science policy and moved into working for the government and worked at the National Cancer Institute at the National Institutes of Health for several years. I worked on a genomics and imaging data repository and building resources for scientists. That led me into moving over to working for associations. And I worked for the American Society of Radiation Oncology and the American Society of Hematology. Started out working on what we were calling big data, then personalized medicine, and getting involved more and more in AI, ML, and how are we working in digital medicine. So looking at how associations and clinicians and physician groups are integrating digital medicine and what should we be thinking about. And then moved over to do a similar type of role at Novartis, working with these associations and Novartis and other partners to see how do we integrate medicine, digital medicine, and how do we move this whole field forward. So that's been my journey. It's been very interesting, not what I thought it would be when I started, but I think this field is just really fantastic and really growing.
That's incredible. Yeah, it seems like you have built such a great wealth of experience. And just a reminder for our audience: if you do have any questions for Judy during the conversation, please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure that we allocate some time towards the end of our discussion for your questions. So I think, Judy, maybe to kind of start us off, would love if you could share a little bit more. I know that when we've talked before, a lot of the things that you've been seeing kind of within the digital medicine space kind of have a lot of ties back to, digital literacy, health literacy, especially, right now in a post-COVID world. Would love if you could share a little bit more about how you would define health and digital literacy and, the importance that you've been seeing as it relates to digital medicine.
Yeah, I think this is so very important. And I think what we've seen with COVID and all the disparities and health equity is part of this, as well as health literacy. And we're having more and more digital solutions that are coming out there, and we really need to work on making sure that people can use them. So yeah, digital health literacy, kind of using the NIH and the WHO definitions, which are the same. The ability to seek, find, and understand and appraise health information from electronic sources and apply the knowledge gained to addressing or solving health problems. So it's, really it's about knowing how to use the digital tool, how to make sense of the data that is produced from that tool, and realizing the importance of the utility in using that tool. So, we have to look at, who is our audience, who are the people who are consumers who are using this technology, and what can we build for them that's personal, that they will use. So there's a lot of things to think about, I think, with that. What sort of things will clinicians use and can they use, and what can be integrated without adding additional burden? And then what sort of tools will consumers use, whether it's a patient themselves or another caregiver, and can they use that? Literacy is going to become a big issue as we keep moving more and more to digital integration.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that, these conversations are being had as we, increasingly start, really pushing a lot of things that maybe, were kind of in-person encounters into kind of a virtual setting. So I'm glad that, this is something that we and other companies are really kind of starting to interrogate and kind of ask those questions. But kind of in your role, would love to kind of see, I'm sure there must have been, this evolution when it comes to digital literacy, and I guess just broader health literacy over the years. And I think, we always talk about COVID being the catalyst, but, technology was definitely alive and thriving even before that. So would love to kind of get your perspective on, the evolution or kind of the journey that you're seeing as it relates to digital literacy through the years.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it did start before COVID. I think the COVID just made things faster. Things that were ready to go really, were able to be pushed forward and move a lot faster and to be accepted in the field. Think of, all the different people that we're trying to reach. Are we reaching, older consumers and older patients who have a different need than people who are much more tech savvy, and really thinking, really seeing that a lot of very thoughtful and very careful looking at who the people are going to be consuming the technology. I think that there's a lot more emphasis on what is being built and that it's user friendly. I think we're also engaging the correct stakeholders. I think making sure that everybody is all involved in the conversation. So it's not just people in the tech industry creating these apps and wearables and all the digital solutions, but it's working with people in industry and working with medical associations and patients, everybody together to see, what do they need, what do they use, what's easy to consume, what makes people's jobs easier. And I think, a lot of things are coming out and people are now starting to think about, what sort of ways do we vet this? What sort of questions do people need to ask? People, we always have lots of resources for patients to say, here are questions to ask, your physician when you see them, if you get this diagnosis. And I think we're going to need the same type of things for digital, like here are things to look at when you're looking at a digital solution and to see if it makes sense for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, is that something that Novartis or yourself is working on, kind of developing some type of framework for that?
There are a lot of associations that are working on that type of framework, and we're working with them on that. I think that's what my role in association engagement is to look at those type of things, like what ways can we partner together to come up with solutions that work for patients and improve outcomes. So I think that kind of to the point of we all need to be involved in it. I don't think any one entity has the answer for what's the perfect solution or what's the perfect use for it. It's just understanding, how do different perspectives, how do different people look at it. And, it's good to work with all these different partners so that we develop a framework that works for people. And there is a lot of work in that area. And I think that's going to be really necessary, both for how do people vet different applications or vet different tools that are out there? And then also, how's the government looking at it? How are regulators looking at it? How are policymakers looking at it? And what sort of things do we need to keep in place, or do we need to change so that there is more acceptance and more use of these digital tools?
Absolutely. I love that you are really kind of bringing up the collaborative piece of it and really the importance. I mean, this is definitely something that, you're right, there is no one answer to it or one particular entity that should be the one leading the charge. It should definitely be something that we are all kind of coming at together. Would love to also learn, from your kind of role, I think within like the trials perspective, how has digital literacy been impacting trials and solutions at Novartis? Are there any particular pain points or learnings that you've been seeing kind of when it's been applied in this way?
Yeah, I think we are seeing more and more integration of tools into trials broadly, obviously Novartis and elsewhere.
Right.
We're looking at, everything from, the entire field, we're looking at everything from telemedicine to decentralized trial solutions. How do you address informed consent? How do you address that, patients' needs and what patients will use? And really, I think also taking a more collaborative approach. I think we're seeing from a lot of different areas that people want to get involved and want to get involved early in these discussions so that we're actually building things that will work for people. I mean, I think we've all seen so many times that, any one entity can build a solution. And if it's not something that's going to be used or necessary for the people you're building it for, then it won't ever get used. So,
Right.
We can come up with great ideas and great things that we think are wonderful. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to help patients, it's not going to improve outcomes. Clinicians won't adopt it, health systems won't use it, people won't pay for it. And then, the people who really need to use that won't be using it. So I think we all have to
Absolutely.
take that approach.
Yeah, incredible. And that's a very, very good point about, really just making sure that, kind of from the beginning, just building something where it is sustainable and, is very easy to implement. And I know that you were kind of thinking through this through the lens of, trials, et cetera. But I mean, I know that we've kind of both seen just health systems in general, increasingly using technology, just for their own patient population, whether that's video visits, telephone visits, et cetera, remote monitoring. Would love to kind of understand your perspective on, what are some of the things that health systems and organizations that have started using, technology, maybe even as a necessity a few years ago, but have kind of hung on to it and are seeing the value of it. How can they ensure that as they start building out, a bigger infrastructure to support digital health, that they can ensure that their patients have the digital literacy that they need to be able to, make healthcare decisions, et cetera?
Yeah, and I think you're right. We are, people are focusing on trials, but also focusing more as well on how it's going to be incorporated into ongoing clinical care, because you don't, as we set things up, we don't want to have something that's in a trial and then never gets used again, because that's, what's the point of that as well. And, kind of thinking about the importance of like listening to people. I think I have an ongoing theme of collaboration and really kind of working and partnering with people. But I think that's really important. You have to, I think health systems, as they're thinking about these new technologies and what they're putting in, the new systems that they're putting in, is it going to be useful for their clinician? Is it going to be something that they can use and won't increase the burden? I hear that all the time of don't give me another app that's just going to make me have to, more time working in the EHR system, or more time,
right,
working on a computer and away from the patient, or, it's another, 5 clicks. It sounds easy when it's one patient, but when you're working with, hundreds of people that you're seeing, then it's not easy anymore. And I think we're going to see that, everybody needs to be trained on this. So there's new clinicians who, are picking it up right away, and this has been their life since, they've had digital their whole lives, to people who, are older in their career and probably don't use as much tech. So I think we need to train everybody. We need to train patients as well, and caregivers. And I think we're going to see like there's more training to like patient navigators and health workers who are able to help as well in that story. And I think we also need to think about, I think a role for associations, what they've been doing as well is kind of getting the word out, that digital medicine is not a second tier, telemedicine is not inferior care. And they've been doing a great job trying to having that conversation. You see more and more, it's not only just, people talking to themselves in the health field, you see more and more that's coming out into mainstream media, and mass consumed media about, how telemedicine is changing, and how, care really does improve outcomes, if you do get to have telemedicine, and showing examples of different fields that this is really working in so far. And I think that's where it's going to become more and more accepted, and people are going to really embrace it a lot more, and not think of it as, well, I can go see my doctor, or I can be in this clinical trial in this one location, but then start to think much more broadly of, oh, well, now I can do, telemedicine, and that's just another part of my care, just like everything else that you get when you actually go into the office.
Absolutely. No, I really like that. There definitely is just reframing it in your mind, and kind of really just starting it to see exactly to your point, just, another tool in the toolkit to your health. But that's something that, you can still get a lot of value and meaning out of. So I really like that you call that out. And I also really like that you called out training, because I definitely feel like that's something that's often forgotten as, a very necessary step when it comes to, change management and utilization. So whether that's, physicians that you're training, or patients, or caregivers, that's definitely something that needs to be incorporated when it comes to like your implementation plan. So I like that you called that out as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's key. And you're never done learning, and there's always something new that's coming out. And I think that's, what's been happening with digital medicine is that it's just so much faster than it ever has been. And, where they're getting the training is going to change, if it's going to be through associations, through different training options that they provide, through, pharma and industry providing training about their specific efforts that they have, or broader efforts that they have. If it's going to be going to annual meetings and getting that type of training, it's really important. It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And, kind of going off of really this theme of just, I think, collaboration has just been the cornerstone of our conversation, which I love, about, bringing groups together to be able to, have these conversations and kind of start thinking some of these things through, which I think is amazing. Something that I know we've also kind of talked about as well, in the past, is really around, what we've seen in technology, how it can be, this great unifier, can connect a lot of people together. However, there still are significant patient populations that do have access issues, and some of those other, inequities that can, make things just that much more challenging when it comes to accessing technology. Would love to kind of learn, what yourself, what your associations and partnerships are kind of, if there's any ideas or things that they're doing to, better either design the technology or kind of create systems of support for those patient populations.
Yeah, I think that's been a huge discussion in the past couple of years about, health equity and digital health equity as well. And I think, as people are designing things, keeping that in mind, we can't take previous biases that, may be in the data already and just propagate them to, the digital world, and we can't just kind of keep, just taking what we have and just changing the format. We have to be very thoughtful as we're doing these, that we are keeping populations in mind. There's a lot of discussion about, access and broadband versus being able to get it through Wi-Fi, making sure you understand how people are accessing their care. Not everybody has a laptop. They do need to do things by a cell phone. What do you do if you don't have a cell phone? What do you do to try to collect people's data more continuously and improve our data? And these are all questions that people are thinking about a lot. And there's a lot of, within, pharmaceutical companies, we're thinking about these things of how can we reach the patients where they are. But associations are thinking about it as well. Who are people who are not getting the access to care, and how can we change that? So I think people are looking at, how do you build frameworks to increase access and to decrease this, increase health equity and decrease the disparities that we have. And then what ways that we actually do it? And then importantly, we have to actually do it. It's not just enough to say, okay, here are the barriers. We have to now do something real to actually make it happen.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, I definitely like that. It doesn't just end with the identification and the awareness. It ends when the problem is solved. So I definitely agree with you on that. You had talked a lot about, really about, the idea of these are conversations that really, involve bringing together a lot of different folks and a lot of different stakeholders that kind of have their particular lens to kind of create solutions. So would love if you can talk a little bit more about, how do we elevate this issue of digital transformation? How do we bring more people, health systems, companies into the conversation to kind of, produce greater understanding and have greater learnings? Or are there any, communities that are available right now for those that are interested?
Yeah, I think that there's, we just bringing people together. I mean, again, the collaboration part of it, if we're doing meetings and we're trying to understand, the different players, we have to talk to the clinicians and the patients and the payers and the data scientists and the, tech companies that are developing these things, and VC who's helping to support it. I think hospital systems, I think we need to make sure that we are all getting the perspectives we need. And if we're doing that, through internal mechanisms, or if we're doing that through external mechanisms, a lot of these associations and companies are doing bigger conversations about that, so that we can really solve some problems and address issues, like you said, with equity and with diversity and with the health literacy problems that are just going to continue to grow if we don't do anything about them. So, there's patient groups that are looking at these things. There's medical associations looking at things. There's companies, both on the pharma and on the tech side. And I think we all need to have conversations about it and actually come up with solutions. And as I said before, implement them so that we can do something and really move the needle on this.
Absolutely. And kind of on that note, would love to see, how would you like to see digital literacy change kind of over the next few years? What are some of the big areas, and maybe for folks on this audience, what are some of the big areas that, need some digital transformation, or where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, I think we have to kind of normalize it, make it, that it's not medicine and digital medicine. And you've heard this, a lot of the conferences and a lot of discussion is, it's medicine, it's not digital medicine. So I think we do really have to normalize it. I think we're starting to have those conversations around telemedicine, that telemedicine is not a second option. It's not the, oh, I'm sorry, we can only get you a telemedicine appointment. We can't get you in to see somebody face to face. And I think we have to get beyond that. And I think that that's where we're headed slowly. I think it's a lot faster now that we've kind of had to push things with COVID.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of places we need to still continue to work. And I think that the digital literacy is definitely an area, and the digital health equity are definitely areas we have to be incredibly mindful of, and think about ways that, how do we get information out to people that they'll use? How do we make sure people find it, and make sure people can share it and get their input on it? What sort of things do they need? So I hope that that's where we are headed. I think we are. I think it's coming, and we all either have to get on board now and have the conversations and do things now, or else we'll just be running to catch up later, and we'll have to use whatever is given to us. So I think we have a huge opportunity right now to really set the stage and to really do some fundamentally good, challenging, but fundamentally good things that'll help patients overall.
Absolutely. I love that. Want to turn over to some questions that we have from the audience. So one of our questions is, are you doing any research on blended medicine? For example, what pieces work better in person versus digitally, and how do we mix and match based on the user's need?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And blended medicine, I think, is going to be where we're headed. What do you need to do in person? What do you need? What can you get virtually? What sort of data can help supplement an in-person visit? Or what sort of combinations do we need to be looking at? And I think that's actually a really great question. I think that's things that a lot of people are thinking about.
That's incredible. And then another question, could you list out the steps for a business? Sorry, can you list out the steps a business needs to keep in mind when co-creating a solution? Some that you had mentioned already. So I think this was kind of earlier in our conversation. I know, Lisa, or Judy, you were talking about government policy, regulations, making sure that we're not working in tech silos. Are there any other kind of lessons or things to kind of keep in mind for companies that are kind of interested in co-creating a solution to improve digital literacy?
Yeah, I think, have the conversations early. If you're approaching a company to come with them with an idea and be open to that discussion and changing to your ideas. I think, one of the hard things is people fall in love with their product, and it's hard to sometimes change and to incorporate other perspectives. But I think that's what we really need to do. And the earlier you can have conversations, either in development or deployment, the better. I know that's hard sometimes, and you can't do that, but as early as you can start to have those conversations, I think it'll be better and easier for everybody to get something to the finish line.
Absolutely, that's very good advice. That's very keen insight. I love that. Yeah, I think it's just kind of being open to getting those feedback and really just kind of incorporating that at the core, really of the development and the design. Absolutely. Wanted to just squeeze in one last question. I know we're about 2 minutes out, but one quick last question for you that one of our participants have is, what is the best way to address to address patient non-compliance with digital medicine? How should we encourage it moving forward?
That's a great question. If I had the answer to that, I would probably make a lot more money. Adherence. I wish I did have the answer to that. I think that's really a very, very good question. And I think everybody is struggling with that. How do we address that? I think we keep trying. We keep trying to understand, the patient perspective and the patient journey. And, I was reading an article today that was talking about, the digital transformation. They were talking about Amazon and what Amazon has gotten wrong and what they didn't, what they weren't able to produce, but another company was able to come in and do. And I don't want to, nothing bad against Amazon by any means, but, I think kind of the idea or the notion that, you have to take a step back and look at what you're doing and what your goals are. Are you going to be very, microscopic and address one person, or are you looking much more broadly? And I think if you have an understanding of where you want to go and what you want to do, will help you try to figure out like the best ways to approach a problem and get the input that you need in order to be able to create an answer. So it's kind of I know that's a little hand wavy, but I think it's a very hard question. I think that we're all very much struggling with that and have been and probably will continue to.
Absolutely. It's kind of like just the growing pains of, just being able to, as we move more, virtually and kind of have these digital tools, that's just going to be a really big, component that we just need to make sure that we're really understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're always going to have the early adopters who are like, oh, this is great. We're going to do this. This is wonderful. I'm going to use it. And then we have the people who are like, I never, don't talk to me about that. I don't want to do anything. So, I mean, how do you get those two together and to have them adopted and use it? It's very difficult.
The ultimate question of digital medicine.
Yeah, for sure.
Wonderful. Well, Judy, I know we're at time, but I have one last question for you, which is what we ask all of our guests for Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. And that question is, what final words of career advice do you have for our audience? Or is there a piece of career advice that you were given that you would like to pass along to us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, trying to listen to people and trying to get perspectives. And as I said before, not falling in love with your solution, but being open to get feedback and input from somebody else. I think, we've all experienced that where, an idea comes forward, but working together, we are actually able to produce something better. It's not easy to do. We're all human. And I think we all struggle with that. But I think that, that's probably the advice that I got early in my career of, try to be open and try to hear what other people are saying and seeing how you can improve what you've created to do something better. So I think I'll leave it there.
I love that. That's a great way to end. Thank you so much, Judy, for taking the time to chat with us today. It was really, really insightful. So I really appreciate you kind of sharing your words of wisdom with us.
Well, thank you, Nina. It's been a real pleasure. And, thank you so much for this opportunity today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for folks in the audience, if you do have any other questions, all of Judy's LinkedIn information is available in the chat. So you could kind of continue the conversation offline. So wanted to thank Judy one last time and just make sure that you join us. We will be on a little bit of a hiatus for the next 2 weeks. Our next session is July 13th. So hope everyone has a great 4th of July, great, time off, and we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.